So when I say that this is relevant right this minute, I really mean the so-called mind-body problem, mind-body dualism, sometimes referred to as Cartesian dualism, and which becomes a conflict with science, because science, as a materialist philosophy of science, is believes there is only matter, and that is materialism. So I wanted to take you back through why we did the etymologies to understand, in the long run, this word psyche, which is a deeper way of talking about the unconscious. So if you remember in our words, we had the word group wake, remember, knowledge, and alive. And then on the other side, we had sleep, forget, ignorance, death. When you line those two up beside each other, it seems very much that wake, remember, knowledge, alive looks a lot like mind, and sleep, forget, ignorance, death looks a lot like the body. So here we come to the mind-body dualism. And another thing I wanted to share with you is that in the etymology, what you see, the further back in time you go, back to the Greeks, you're getting an idea of something alive being not in the body, which is sort of a Greek view of looking at the unconscious. So what is alive is not the body. What is alive and survives the body is the butterfly of psyche, the word soul. The further back in time you go, there's that view. The further closer in time you keep coming, there's more of an association with the mind being what is awake and the body being what is asleep. Now, that poses a real problem for a materialistic psychology, in the sense that prior to the year 1800 and the beginning of so-called scientific psychology, when psychology separates from philosophy, psychology literally is the study of the soul. But in a materialist framework, that cannot be the object of the study of science. So let's talk about materialism for a little. What is materialism? Hopefully, you know it is the basis of our modern technological culture. Materialism is the philosophical opinion that all that exists is matter. Matter has the properties that we know as the laws of physics. Matter is a closed system. Even in Einstein, we get something called the box universe. And the idea is we live within the closed system of the box universe. And there's nothing outside the system that intervenes in a closed system. Therefore, everything that happens is reducible, and there's a little bit the reductionistic part, to matter. Why does that matter for the unconscious and the study of psychology? The answer is there is no psyche. Psyche is an epiphenomenon of matter. And in this case, organic matter, the organic matter of the brain. So even today, when we talk about psychology, from my point of view, and really from this historical point of view, psychology today is ego psychology. It's the psychology of the ego, not the psychology of the unconscious, because all there is to study is the ego. And going back even into the late 1940s and finally coming into the 50s and the 60s, the pushback on the Freudian control of maybe academic institutions, training facilities, behaviorism comes along as a materialistic science of psychology, saying that all these things that we talk about, repression, displacement, the Freudian Oedipus complex, all of those things are ideas, and we can't measure ideas, and we can't make predictions from ideas, and we can't make observations about ideas. What we can look at, and the only thing that we know about psychology, is behavior, because we can measure behavior. We can experiment with various tests on behavior. And so behaviorism comes in slowly, but building into the 1970s is replacing the last vestige of the study of the psychology of the unconscious to become a purely materialistic science. So let's think about that for a minute. Well, let's start with this. From a materialistic point of view, anything about the psyche, a butterfly, a soul, is by definition, I think we want to use the word myth in the pejorative sense. We have a lot to talk about the concept of myth, but in the pejorative sense that it is factually inaccurate, it is not true. There is no soul, there is no God, and all of the ancient ideas and the images that go with ancient religions, much less modern religions, they're just the result of magical thinking or clumsy thinking. Like a child, the way that a child thinks that the lights in your house work, as if by magic. All of those are modes of thinking that have long since been debunked and overthrown, and nothing about them is useful. That is the mindset of modern scientific psychology, because they don't tell us anything about the functioning of the brain, like the soul. Where does that fit in? You don't need the soul. So there was a book called The Concept of Mind by Gilbert Ryle in 1949, which introduced this concept of the ghost in the machine. And what he meant, he was talking about in the mind-body problem, that from the point of view of a materialist philosophy, the mind is an illusion as this epiphenomenon of the brain. The mind is just a ghost in the machine. You don't need the concept of mind. It's just a materialist view of everything is in the body. Now, that's the extreme view, but don't forget, it is the predominant point of view. That I think that's what I want to get at. I'm not a philosopher, much less an academic philosopher. I'm just a psychoanalyst. My only goal here, we could spend hours and hours on the mind-body problem. My only goal is to bring it in historically in our discussion of the unconscious. So, one primary argument in the mind-body problem from the materialist is that if you say that there is a mind which exists not of matter, but of something in the ether, a thought is outside of the system, then please show how this thing that exists in a place that is not the place where everything else is able to influence our closed box. Because the materialist point of view is that everything that happens within the system. is a result of matter, the causality, functions without disruption. I would point out, actually, that there are specific cases of ways in which thought influences matter demonstrably, and it's not an illusion. For instance, a famous experiment that has to do with hypnosis. Hypnosis is, I hypnotize you and I give you the suggestion that I'm going to touch your arm with a burning iron rod pulled straight from the fire. I give you that suggestion. Now, that exists in a non-materialist space, the mind, because it is only a thought, the thought of being burned by a burning hot rod. Now, then, in the experiment, I touch your arm with a pencil. A materialist argument is that the cells don't know about the thought because cells don't have thoughts, and that a pencil is a pencil is a pencil. If it looks like sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? Nothing would happen. But the result of the experiment, of course, I've given you the suggestion. The skin blisters where I touch you with a pencil because of the suggestion, the thought, that it's a burning hot iron rod. That's not supposed to happen. That is then now this immaterial thought in the mind having an effect on matter, skin cells. Now, I need to add this part about this experiment about the blistering with hypnosis is really only attested in one paper from May of 1947, a Dr. Ullman, in the journal, American Journal of Psychiatry, which in that case is a PTSD victim, a World War II veteran, and you would have to say there is a connection between PTSD and dissociation and a higher rate of suggestibility, meaning a stronger depth of hypnosis. And so while there were other papers and interest in these dermatological effects of hypnosis up in through the 1960s, it's not well validated. We can say that. But I use the story to be dramatic and to make a point. Another example that's a little more, you would say, is also the placebo effect. I mean, it's related. A belief in someone's mind that they're being given pain medication to relieve pain should have absolutely no effect on matter. And yet we know the placebo effect somewhat everywhere, that insofar as you believe you've been given medication to alleviate certain physical conditions, there is an ameliorative effect from the placebo. And again, that is a thought having a direct influence on matter. I can think of a couple other examples. There's the interesting phenomenon of the phantom limb. It's a little bit related, perhaps it's tangential, but the phantom limb, right? Again, in a way, there shouldn't be such a thing as a phantom limb, because again, that is a thought. It is immaterial, the phantom limb, but it's clear that people experience a phantom limb and have pain, and sometimes excruciating pain in the phantom limb. Materialists would say, well, that's because the brain is all screwed up. But in the so-called mirror therapy, you set it up so that the mirror looks like the phantom limb, and then when you massage and you give treatment to the phantom limb, the pain in the phantom limb goes away or is ameliorated to a great extent. That's kind of incredible, right? Another example you could use is the basic lie detector, right? The whole point about the lie detector is that theoretically, lots of research now, when you're telling a lie, the galvanometer registers a change in your heart rate, blood pressure, skin conductivity. It measures that change, and that's what all of those needles are about. The connection with the mind-body problem has to do with the fact that the thought that you lied exists only in the mind. It is immaterial, this thought that you lied. And how does a materialist explain how that thought changes respiration, blood pressure, skin conductivity? How can a thought change those functions in the body, which is matter?